Earlier today, I finished reading The Real Life of Alejandro Mayta by Mario Vargas Llosa. This is the first book I've read by Mario Vargas Llosa, and I read this one in particular because it is the book club pick for next month for a bookstore in my city that I'm gonna or not no not next month, this month. It's yeah, no, it's this weekend. I'm gonna go to that. So had to read this to take part in that discussion. I had heard of the author though. I know he won the Nobel Prize, so I was excited to finally get around to reading him. So this book is it's sort of an account of um like far left politics in Peru in the middle of the 20th century. And the author was involved in far left politics in Peru in the middle of the 20th century as a young man. But later in life, by the time he was writing this book and most of his books, he had sort of shifted pretty far to the right, actually. I don't think he ever got like super conservative on like social issues or human rights issues or anything like that. Like I don't think he ever became like racist or homophobic or anything like that, as far as I'm aware, but he became very far right economically. Like he was almost like a right libertarian, or like a classical liberal at least. And like he passed away a few years ago, but at the time of his death, he was a vocal supporter of the current president of Argentina, Javier Milei, I think is his name. Um, so yeah, pretty dramatic shift in his politics, and that shift had already begun before he started writing this. But surprisingly, this is not like a takedown of the far left. He's definitely making fun of them in some ways at some times in the book, but it's mostly a pretty empathetic portrayal. And you can tell that um, he must have had some genuine affection for the people that he was involved with when he was involved in far left politics as a young man. Because there's a lot of empathy in the portrayals in this book. But so this book is kind of an interesting structure. There's a frame narrative of a writer who might just be a fictionalized version of the author himself, who is trying to write a novel that's going to be like a fictionalized account of this real um, failed communist revolution in Peru in it seems like the late 50s or maybe early 60s. And then the frame narrative takes place in maybe the 70s or the 80s, um, like maybe about a decade before this book was written. Decade at the most, I would say. The book came out in 1986, I believe, or I think it came out in English in 1986. The original might have been like 84. Um, so yeah, actually, probably yeah. So and I again, I think the frame narrative about the writer is supposed to take place in like the late 70s or early 80s. Um, but he's trying to write about these events in like the late 50s maybe. Um, and he's kind of going around and interviewing these people who knew the leader of the failed revolution, who was named Alejandro Mayta. He's interviewing all these people who knew him. He's trying to come up with his life, but he's what was it? Where am I going? He's not like he's not writing like an account of what actually happened. He's very adamant about the fact that it's going to be a novel and he's going to lie, but he wants to know the real story in order to know what he's lying about. Um, which I think is a really fun idea. And I mean that's kind of a lot of what writing is, right? Uh, so and then structurally it's very interesting because the writing in here switches very quickly and very fluidly between the frame narrative and then um, conversations between Alejandro Maita and the people at the time in of the failed revolution. It can be hard to follow the way that it switches back and forth, um, but I did find it engaging, and yeah, I did. Excuse me. I did find I mostly found it engaging. I did find that it dragged a little bit around the middle. Um, like right before they try to do the revolution, because like the first maybe 100 pages are about Alejandro Maita's youth, and then the middle chunk is like he's involved in far left politics and they're planning this revolution, and that part gets a little boring maybe. And then there's the actual attempt at a revolution and the failure of it for like the last third of the book, and that part got interesting again. um but yeah, yeah, so I was just really I was expecting this to be, you know, not a very charitable portrayal of the Peruvian far left, given where the author's politics had shifted by the time he was writing this. Um, but it was, I would say very critical of the far left parties and the way that they're organized and the way that they argue with each other. But as far as like these revolutionaries as people, it's very sympathetic, and very empathetic, as I said. Um, and maybe not all, maybe not even most, but a lot of these characters are very, very relatable and likable. Um, the major ones, I would say, the major characters are all very likable. Some of the like random party officials that Maita has disagreements with are just like kind of, you know, not the nicest people. But yeah, another sort of wrinkle to this is that Alejandro Maita is gay. Um, well, okay, so but here's the thing. Throughout the whole book, he's portrayed as gay, and that's like a major part of the like conflict within himself and with some other people in these far left parties. But then at the end, when he actually interviews Alejandro Maita, you find out that he wasn't gay, and just the writer has invented that through this whole book, because it's like it's just to like amplify the way in which he comes across as marginalized even within his own far left political community. Because a lot of these people, it's not like, you go to like the DSA today and nobody's going to call you a slur for being gay. But far left politics in, sort of socially conservative countries in the 1950s and 60s were not super gay friendly. So that's like a source of conflict and a source of him being ostracized even within that community. Um, so that was really interesting, but throughout the book I found that really interesting. But then at the end we find out that the author made it up, or the writer character made it up, and it's also never clear like, is this writer character the author himself, or is it because Mario Vargas Llosa, I think, said in an interview that like, yeah, Alejandro Maita was a real guy and I really went and interviewed him, and this book is actually just me. Like the frame narrative is actually just me, but I don't know if that's actually true, because like the whole idea of this book is kind of how stories can change and be warped in the hands of a storyteller. So um, yeah, I don't know. Really interesting structure there, all throughout. I feel like my thoughts on it are really scattered, but I don't know how they could not be scattered after reading a book like this. Um, I am entertaining the possibility of reading more Mario Vargas Llosa. I didn't fall in love with this book, but I liked it, and it did some really interesting things. So yeah. Um, I'm looking forward to discussing it with this book club at the bookstore downtown. And I don't know, maybe I'll make an updated version of this video after that. Maybe talking to other people will help me kind of sort my thoughts out. But yeah, I think that's all I have for now on this. And thank you for listening.